G'day, welcome back to the channel and welcome to today's video. My name's Matt, but you'll know me as WFX Malice. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to install, set up and run Hyper-V. Now, what is Hyper-V? Hyper-V is Microsoft's version of a hypervisor. It's free within Microsoft Windows 10 and 8 for people who have pro versions. If you have the home version, there is a way of installing it. You do need to go and download a script from, I think the website is called iTechTix. The script looks a little bit suspicious, but trust me, I've tested it, I've vetted it, it is working and will help you install Hyper-V. I could go and put the code in the description, but Microsoft seemed to change the names of the services and the servers that you're installing. These guys obviously keep their script up to date, so I'm just going to say go to their website and get the script. Now, before we get started, let's look at a couple of textbook definitions. What is a hypervisor? A hypervisor is a piece of software that allows you to run virtual machines within it. A hypervisor allows one host or multiple host computers to support multiple guest virtual machines by sharing its resources, such as memory or processor. What's a virtual machine? A virtual machine is an emulation of a computer system. Virtual machines are based on computer architecture, providing functionality of physical computers through software. First, we need to make sure we have Hyper-V installed. Click on the Start menu and start typing Hyper. If it's installed, you'll see Hyper-V Manager with this blue icon. If not, you'll see Turn Windows Features on or off. Click on that. You'll see Hyper-V. Expand this out. Now, there's two sections to it. Hyper-V Management and Hyper-V Platform. Hyper-V Management Tools, you'll only install if you only want to remotely manage a Hyper-V server somewhere else. In this case, we want both of them. Let that install and let your computer restart. Now go to Hyper-V Manager. Go to the Actions menu at the top and go to Hyper-V Settings. We need to do a bit of housekeeping. We need to allocate somewhere that we're going to store our virtual hard disks and our virtual machines. Now, this is going to be on a mass storage device in your computer, not on your little SSD that you're running your Windows on. So go ahead and create two folders, one called VHD and one called VM, and yes, go and allocate those to each one respectively. Next, we're going to go into the Virtual Switch Manager. We need to create some switches, some ways that the machines can communicate with each other and the internet. So we've got external, internal, and private. External allows you to map the network to your external physical connection to your internet. Next, we've got internal. This allows your virtual machines to talk to the host computer. Private only allows the virtual machines to talk to one another. This is great for sandboxing. Say you've got some suspicious software and you want to see what it does, you can open it within this and it's not going to spread to the rest of your network. So in Virtual Switch Manager, click on External, click on New and give it a name. Just call it External. It gets really awkward if you've just got Virtual Switch, Virtual Switch, Virtual Switch. Now you'll see here, it's allocated itself to my wireless network adapter. Now, if you are connected with Ethernet, go and change that to Ethernet. If you're connected via wireless, connect it to wireless. Maybe you might want to run two different external networks. Depends on your setup. Let's keep things simple. Let's just work with one external. Next, we're going to create an internal virtual switch. Now, as I said, this is for your virtual machines to be able to talk to your host machine. And this is great for if you need to share files between them. So go ahead and click Internal, create virtual switch, and give it a name. Just call it internal. Let's just keep things as simple as possible. Once you've done that, go ahead and hit apply and then click OK. We're going to create another virtual switch being the private. Now, this is just for the virtual machines to talk to one another. Nothing will get shared outside your network. So if you're looking at playing with some potentially dangerous pieces of software, it's not going to spill out across the network. Go ahead and click create new switch, give it a name, private, and click OK. Now we've got three virtual switches. Let's have a look and see what this has done in our network settings. Go to change adapter options and you'll see that there's a bunch of new network connections in here. Now, normally I would just see Bluetooth network connection, Ethernet, and Wi-Fi. What Hyper-V does is it creates this virtual Ethernet default switch. Then you can see virtual Ethernet external, virtual Ethernet internal, but we don't see virtual Ethernet private because this is the host machine. It's a completely different network. Now, normally you could go into here and you could set your IP addresses, making sure you've got two different subnets for the two different networks. But as you can see here, I've sort of paid that off and I just wanted to jump straight into creating some virtual machines. Let's go ahead and we're going to click New Virtual Machine. Now in this case, I'm just going to create a Linux test machine. So we can go and give it a name. Linux test in this case. Make sure you name your machines so that you know what's what. Gets confusing once you've got a heap of virtual machines running. Now, there's two types of machines you can create, a Gen 1 or a Gen 2. The only real difference in Gen 2 is you've got the UEFI support for booting. I like to just leave it on Gen 1. It seems to work fine. Let's allocate some RAM. Let's connect it to whichever switch we want it to. So in this case, it's a private. This is a sandbox testing machine. Now we can make sure that our virtual machine's pointing to the right location we already set earlier and give it a size. I only need 40 gigabyte for this. Now we're going to go and choose our operating system. So you can have a CD or a USB. In this case, I'm pointing it to an ISO image I already have on my machine. Click Finish. Don't go and start it just yet. For some reason, you can't allocate the processor cores. So we're going to right click on it and choose Settings, go down to Processor and increase those cores because 1 is going to be a very slow, painful install process. So on this machine, it is a quad-core i7, which gives us 8 virtual cores. So I've only given it 4. I could have given it 8 if I wanted to. Go ahead and click Start. You can double click on it and this will bring up the console window so we can see what's happening in the background. Now this isn't a Linux install tutorial, so we're just going to move right on and we're going to create another virtual machine. Now for this one, we're going to create a Windows 10 machine. We're going to use this as a game server. So go ahead and give it a name, Windows 10 game. We're going to select generation 1. We don't need to use generation 2, even though it is a UEFI based operating system. We're going to give it a little bit of RAM. Let's go and give it 4 gig of RAM. Now you'll notice here, I'm fumbling around with the numbers. Anytime you open the console window for a virtual machine, it seems to mess with your numlock button. So even though the light's lit up to say numlock is on, for some reason it alternates backwards and forwards. So just go and hit numlock, reactivate it. I'm going to give this one an external switch and we're going to give it a slightly smaller hard drive than it wants there. Let's give it a 60 gigabyte. I probably could have given it a little bit more. And same again, we're going to install from a Windows 10 ISO image. Now, I will say this isn't a legitimate version of Windows. I do a lot of virtual machine testing, I do a lot of sandboxing, and so don't go and use a legitimate version of Windows if you're just installing Windows, testing it and uninstalling it. You will lock up your activation key really quickly. Go ahead and allocate your processors. In this instance, I'm going to give it 4 cores. I'm going to hit OK and let's start that machine up. Now, I do want to point out, when you're running virtual machines, when you're talking about processors, it's virtual processors. So this particular laptop has a 4-core i7, which gives us 8 virtual cores. I could go and allocate 8 cores to every single one of my virtual machines without flooding the resources. However, with RAM, it's physical RAM. So Hyper-V is quite clever. It'll only allocate what the machine needs to use at the time. But if you've allocated 4 gig maximum for each machine, you've got to allow for when all the machines peak, they're going to require that physical memory in your machine. Now, I've got 32 gig of RAM in this laptop, so we're not going to run out of RAM in a hurry, but be aware of that when you start hosting game servers that require a lot of RAM. So for this, I'm just going to go ahead and install Windows 10. Now, it's not a tutorial on installing Windows 10, so let's fast forward. Let's go back to our network switches because this is something I paid off and I mentioned earlier. We're going to go into the properties and we're going to go to the IPv4 settings. Going to go and give this a static IP address based on the local network, and there's that numlock issue I talked about earlier. So 10.0.0.60 in this instance I'm going to give this machine because that's what I'm using on my physical network. Go and give it a subnet 255.255.255.0, and remembering with your subnetting, by putting the .0 on the end, that allows us to use all 254 available IP addresses in that range. Go ahead and click OK. Now we're going to go and give the internal network an IP address range as well. So in this case, I'm just going to go and give it 10.0.11.20. Now you notice different subnet. We're going to go on the .11, so 255.255.255.0 because we're only changing the last octet. And we can go and give it a default gateway. This is really irrelevant, but I'm just going to give it 10.0.11.1. And then we can go ahead and hit OK. So this is separating those two networks. This is going to allow us to be able to ping backwards and forwards across those networks without crossing traffic and without getting too mixed up. So I'm going to go ahead and open up command prompt, and we're going to do a IP config to confirm these settings are allocated to the machine. So 10.0.0.60 to the physical, 10.0.11.20 in our Windows virtual machine. Remembering this is an external, we're going to go to the network settings. We're going to go to our properties and our IPv4 settings once again. And for this one, remembering it's the external, so 10.0.0.60 we allocated to our other machine. We're going to go in 10.0.0.61. That way, if I was going to ping the host from here, I'd ping 10.0.0.60, or if I was on the host and I wanted to ping the virtual machine, I'd ping 10.0.0.61. Same again, if you want to map a drive between the two of them, those are the addresses we'd use. From here, we can go and open up a command prompt, and we can go and do another IP config just to make sure that everything is set as we typed in. It's good to double check this. It saves a lot of troubleshooting down the line. So as we talked about, 10.0.0.61 on 255.255.255.0. If we want to remote connect to this one using MSTSC or remote desktop connection, we need to go into our system properties and go into remote settings. Make sure that we allow remote connection from another computer. Click apply. It's going to ask what sort of resolution we want to give that one. Click OK and job done. Now, before we go too far, let's go into command prompt and let's do one final check before we can say we're 100% done. Let's open up command prompt and let's do a ping to the default gateway, which in this case for me is 10.0.0.1. This confirms we have connectivity across our network outside of the host. Good, we've got that. Let's do a ping to the internet. Let's go to Google Quad 8, so 8.8.8.8, and as you can see, we have an external connection. We could theoretically now go and manage this machine using Hyper-V from another computer anywhere in the world. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something out of this. See you in the next video.